That week where I spent 30 minutes talking about a 10-minute Google search to show why the below statement is factually incorrect. You know, I've never done a personal response video before. Let's see what happens. So, a few weeks ago, Tantroo made a video attacking something I said on Twitter and giving me some helpful life advice and ideas on the person he thinks I should be. And he's made videos before trashing me, to which normally an instrument has yet to be created capable of measuring the actual lack of fuck I give. But in this case, since he addressed me personally and actually sent me a link in Twitter to this very video, it's apparently something he really wants me to see. So, let's see what he has to say.
Hey, so it's another week, it's another time in furry news. What are we going to talk about this week in furry news? No! No, why? Why?
So the guy starts off his video by diabolically forgetting the topic of discussion that he himself chose for his own show, evidently turns on his camera in a state of helpless tabula rasa so that he can then remember the subject he's chosen and serenade his viewers with a verse of bemoaned caterwauling designed to express his pain that he lives in a world where the ranting Gryphon dared to open his mouth to say, you know, anything. Call me crazy, but I'm getting the feeling this guy is not interested in a fair and honest discussion here. In fact, if there was a more blatant way to demonstrate the discussion that follows is little more than regurgitated reactionary hysteria mob indoctrination, it would have to involve the image of an outraged purple-haired swamp donkey throwing bricks at a Starbucks outside a Ben Shapiro speech.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to use this as an opportunity in order to teach people how to dissect information on the internet. How to digest it, how to engage in it, and how to be better at sort of understanding things and trying to come to actually analyzing things beyond emotion.
And thus, the first mystery to rear its ugly SJW head is, why would he need to interpret what I've said? My words are right there. People can read. I'm not speaking fucking Swahili. They can see it plain as day. The impression he's giving you here is that my statement is actually secret code, and he's going to tell you what it actually means. So let me ask you this, Tantroo, and not just you, but anyone who feels they need to reword and rearrange someone's statements in order for people to hear what they want them to hear. If my statement is in itself bad, hurtful, or wrong, then why do you have to reword it in order for people to be outraged by it? Why do you need to supplant your own meaning on top of what I've said in order for people to think that it's wrong? Wouldn't they see it on their own? I said hate is never good, violence is never good, and you have to undergo the monumental levels of mental gymnastics to explain how, in some universe, this is just terrible, horrible fucking thing to say. What you're basically saying is the words I actually said are meaningless, and what you've decided I meant is the actual content of the statement. So just a little bit of rule of life here, okay? Just a little thing for you to remember in your head. If there is any situation where you find yourself altering someone's words from what they actually said in order to tell people what they're actually saying, then you are probably the victim of a botched abortion. But surely you say, surely he's not going to completely rewrite what I said. I mean, you know, the actual quote is right on the screen there. He's not gonna look you dead in the eye and tell you I said something completely different than what's being displayed right on his screen, right? People don't actually do that.
Two's hyper-pacifism came under fire again, as he basically tried to retcon the 1940s and say, well, maybe if people were nicer to the Nazis, maybe if the Nazis were nicer, people were nicer to the Nazis, they wouldn't have invaded Poland. And the social-political thing of World War II would have never happened, and blah, blah, blah. So
as if to impart the very least amount of shock after an intro where he basically says he's going to take something I said and tell you it means something I didn't say, he starts out the meat of this video, the purpose of which is to argue against something I said by inventing something I fucking didn't say. My statement was, if the Nazis didn't hate, then they wouldn't have killed people. And if the people who hated Nazis hadn't hated them, they wouldn't have killed them. Hate is never good. Violence is never good. If someone tells you that violence is the answer, they're wrong. But this is what you're telling people I said. Well, maybe if people were nicer to the Nazis, maybe if the Nazis were nicer and people were nicer to the Nazis, they wouldn't have invaded Poland, and the socio-political thing of World War II would have never happened, and blah, blah, blah. That's what you're telling people I said. If these two statements look anywhere remotely similar to you, then you need to get in your car right now, drive back to your third grade teacher, and kick her in the taint until she gets gives you the education our tax dollars paid for. Jackasses like you are the reason 16-year-olds come up to me and say, hey, you're too Gryphon. You're the one that grafted a camel penis onto a Mexican child's forehead. You read 3 words out of a statement I make, juggle them around, and you spin your mental wheel of extremist rhetoric bullshit to concoct the rest. You know, in a better world, even the most myopic of simpletons would hear what you said, then see the actual quote, and realize they're not even in the same fucking time zone. But unfortunately, in the society we live in right now, a person with an IQ equal to the brick holding up his trailer could be seen as a modern-day Isaac Newton compared to the inutile mass of defective gray matter languishing in the putrid trenches of social media. That wasn't my quote, it wasn't a rephrase, it wasn't even a restatement. You just made some bullshit up and put it in my mouth. If you've got an argument with something I've said, then that's perfectly fine with me. But get with the program, learn how to read, learn how to comprehend what you're reading, and try having a point.
So a lot of people obviously gave him critiques about this particular sort of position.
You're using the word critique here, as in critic, as in critical. No, that didn't happen. There was no critique. What there was a clutch of triggered keyboard warriors squirting intantrumed hate butter out of their nipples and squealing that I was a racist and a Holocaust denier about a statement that says we shouldn't hate or be violent to one another. That is not critique. That is meaningless, incomprehensible, autistic screeching caused not by what I said, but by the fact that there are now fully grown adults on the internet, not unlike yourself, who have the contextual cognizance of an inbred goldfish and the reading comprehension of a lobotomized quadriplegic fence post.
And said, hate groups are an actual problem. People, not everyone's anti-violence, and if you're anti-violence against people who are pro-violence, then it'll just give them a vacuum in which to commit more violence.
I tell people they shouldn't hate each other because if people didn't hate each other, then there wouldn't be any hate groups, you drill bit! You can't have hate groups if no one hates each other! Your response to me saying that hate is never good is to say, but then the haters will come after us. You're actually arguing against the statement that hate is never good by indicating that hate isn't good. If I'd said drinking and driving is never good, would your response been, but then we'll be run over by drunk drivers? Because that's kind of what you just did. And you might say that, the idea of people not hating each other is just a pipe dream and it'll never happen. But if you're gonna suggest I stop advocating for a better world just because it may never happen, then you can kiss my ass. That's not my style, that's not me, that's not how I operate. To be honest, I get no end of amusement out of people who clutch their pearls and become absolutely appalled at the idea that they need to stop being hateful and violent to people who are on their shit list for being hateful and violent. That's just magical. But see, I understand. I get it. When I say hate is never good, you don't hear that. That's not what you hear. When I say people shouldn't hate and shouldn't be violent, you can't even conceive the idea that I'm talking to the racists, and I'm talking to the Nazis, and anyone else who has a hateful ideology. You can't grasp that because you're indoctrinated into an ideology, the whole point of which is to create enemies for itself. So even a statement as simple and straightforward as hate is a bad thing has to be distorted to the point that it's an attack against you. But then in the video now, he makes up a statement that I never made and says that statement is terrible. But then he goes, never mind, I didn't want to talk about that. What I really want to talk about is this.
Said, well, the Southern Poverty Law Center tallied that 1,064 incidents of hate crime occurred in 2017. Relatively few, ending in death. 3,500 people, on average, are killed every year in swimming pools. Swimming pools are a larger threat than racists. Why aren't you going after them? Because human beings are concurrent animals. We can solve problems concurrently. We don't have to solve one problem in order to solve another problem. In other words, we can solve the swimming pool problem at the same time we're solving basically the hate crime problem. Because human beings aren't linear beings. Because literally, right now, I'm breathing. At the same time, I'm moving my arms. At the same time that I'm talking. At the same time that I'm adjusting the glasses on my face. I can do multiple things at the same time. As an individual, I can do that, right? I don't have to focus on my breathing and only my breathing, because if I had to focus on my breathing and only my breathing, I'd really be like...
Ooh, yeah, I like it. This is the I can do more than one thing at a time dance. Yeah. The other day, a friend of mine told me that context is dead, that when you put something on the internet, It may have well been the first and only thing you've ever said in your life because people will not care about anything that came before it or why it's there. And I can see, Tantroo, you're really working on that already here. You're trying so desperately hard to miss the entire point. Two says that racism is of relatively little threat compared to other things in our daily lives. But that's wrong because I can do this. Yeah, this is the I'm right dance.
People have concurrent brains. They can solve multiple problems at the same time. Like they can analyze one little tweet and make a whole freaking 30-minute video on it.
Which is exactly what people do when they want to tear apart a very simple statement and look at every syllable under a microscope, hoping to find even one little speck of anything they can be triggered about. It's called mental gymnastics.
So that's the answer to the question, but the question is making the assumption that the facts stated before are accurate. So what I did, instead of responding to this tweet and making that statement or whatever, I instead looked up to see if the statement made is actually factual, and to realize that, no, this is not correct in the way that it's being presented.
Holy hairy ballsack! Did I get something wrong? Well, please, enlighten me on what's incorrect about this.
I did find a website which talked about swimming pool safety, which discussed how many people died in swimming pool accidents per year. And yes, it was about from the year 2006 to 2014, they said about 3,500 people annually.
You were supposed to tell me how it was wrong, but then you...
The number 1,064 does come from the Southern Poverty Law Center. It does come from that group that he claims it came from.
So after confidently claiming that my statement is factually incorrect, he then goes on to verify that my sources and numbers are correct. I'm starting to believe that speaking the phrase "two is wrong" has become like a ritual consecration practice for their cult meetings. It doesn't even mean anything anymore. It's just some hallowed sequence of intonement sacredly uttered to signify that the divine triggering will now commence. Two is wrong. Of course he was right about all this stuff, but two is wrong. Because I can do this.
However, the amount of coverage that number goes over is in fact not equivalent to the amount of coverage that comes in for the swimming pool thing, okay? It's only covering particular major metropolitan areas in which the Southern Poverty Law Center covers in that particular yearly statistic.
So he has no problems with the sources, no problems with the numbers, but what he does have a problem with is the fairness in which I use them. And here's where I have to suck it up a little bit because he actually has a point. The number of swimming pool deaths that I use was actually an average from all over the country. The number of hate crime incidents was taken only from selected big cities. Now, I wasn't aware of this until he pointed it out. And if that is the case, then he's right. It is not fair to say that racism is less of a threat than swimming pools using these numbers. Well, by the sweaty ball sack of Zeus, that's not good enough. So let's look at this again and let's make sure it's fair this time, okay?
So, no, you're factually incorrect. So why should I bother answering your question?
For one reason and one reason only. Because though unwittingly, you actually uncovered a bigger flaw in my argument than you anticipated. And that is that in my attempt to demonstrate that drowning in swimming pools is more of a threat to our safety than racism, I compared swimming pool deaths with hate crime incidents. A hate crime incident can be almost anything. If someone yells the N-word while they're taking a piss on your lawn, flamingos, that can be reported as a hate crime. Hate crimes range from murdering someone because of their race all the way up to yelling a racial slur at someone. And I'm sure you'd agree that when comparing the deadliness of two different things, it's not really fair to compare a death with, say, a robbery or a verbal assault, now is it? So in order to make this totally fair, we would have to compare swimming pool deaths to hate crime deaths over the same period of time all over America. I mean, right? I can't believe I overlooked that, Average annual swimming pool deaths in America over the last 10 years, 3,500. And straight from the FBI crime statistics website, average annual of hate crime related deaths in America over the same period of time, oops! So I'd like to thank you, Tantroo, for holding my feet to the fire and getting me to re-examine my argument. With your help, I can now confidently demonstrate that not only is hate crime more rare than drowning in swimming pools, it's more rare than being killed by fucking lightning. Literally fewer people die in America from hate crime every year than shits I take in a week. And for those of you who are watching and thinking, wait a minute, if hate crimes are so rare, then what about this huge wave of Nazi violence and the furry fandom in America in general that people are freaking out over? That would just mean that these people are just running around and calling people Nazis and they're just full of shit. Bingo! I've been trying to get people to realize this for months. It's the whole point of the Twitter conversation I had that Tantroo is flailing around trying to discredit. This army of alt-right Nazi racist doom that's taking over America, it's not there. It doesn't fucking exist. They're imagining this shit. They're barking at shadows. They're making monsters out of nothing. Because if their outrage was anywhere near proportionate to the reality of the situation, then there'd be almost nothing to be outraged about. And whoa, we can't have that. No. The high order of the Church of Righteous Victimhood demand to have something to throw a tantrum about. So they have to call you and me and everyone else a Nazi so they can continue to cleave on to their precious fucking hatred. Now, obviously, no amount of death due to racial hatred is acceptable or excusable. Even if it's fewer people a year than die from drowning in a bucket of hummingbird piss, it's still not acceptable. But this outrage culture that's just shitting themselves brainless over it, they're not making mountains out of molehills. They're making planets out of gerbil turds, and it's just making the problem worse. And it's inevitably, there are going to be people who are going to say that by what I'm saying right now, I'm supporting racism and I'm supporting Nazis and alt-right and scourging interplanetary evil. I don't support racism of any kind, ever, but I also don't support horse shit either. If you're going to go batshit over the idea that there was 1,000 plane crashes last year, and I say, actually, there were only a few, that doesn't mean I support plane crashes. Are plane crashes bad? Yes. Should we be doing something to prevent them? Absolutely. But if you're gonna say that tens of thousands of them are falling out of the sky every day, that's horseshit. And unless your problem is an under-fertilized chrysanthemum bed, then horseshit doesn't solve problems. Does racism exist? Yes. Should we be working to prevent it? Absolutely we should. But the problem is never going to be solved if you confront it with horseshit. And hysterically pointing and accusing racism on every white person you see who isn't dyeing their armpit hair and burning down a fucking university somewhere is without a doubt the horsiest of shit.
Here's the thing, too. It's okay to get involved in politics. It's okay to get involved in comedy. But unless you have a foundation of truth in which you're speaking from, your comedy and your politics will fall flat.
And I agree completely.
It would be more like, it's like, why did that person end up drowning in a swimming pool? Did they dive in the shallow end of the... Did they dive like they were in the... Did they dive like they were in the deep end of the pool when they were actually in the shallow end? Which, by the way, happens on Twitter sometimes, too. All right, some people dive in thinking they're in the deep end, but they're actually in the shallow end of the pool. Just saying.
Oh, I'm not going to argue with you there. When you dive in with extreme leftists, you are definitely in the shallow end of a lot of things.
So my question here is since you didn't offer a reference for your statement, I have to assume that you are the one making this statement. If you are, you're misleading your audience, which is heinous. Because the actual number should be 6,100-ish to 3,500.
I love how he goes, here's my question, and then he doesn't ask a question. He just says more shit. It's like, well, my question is so profound, it isn't even there. But wait, hold up. Sherman set the Wayback Machine for 10 minutes ago.
I did find a website which talked about swimming pool safety, which discussed how many people died in swimming pool accidents per year. The number 1,064 does come from the Southern Poverty Law Center. It does come from that group that he claims it came from.
Earlier in the same video, he takes my statement, finds the numbers on the internet, he finds out they're from where I said they were, verifies it in the video, even puts a link to that information in the description of his video, and now he's saying I made it all up. Two says this thing, and I found out it's true, but he's still making it up. It's the perfect crime. At this point, he has to know that he's either full of shit or he's lying and he just doesn't remember it. From this point, it basically falls apart into nonsense. Here he spends several minutes trying to prove that I'm inconsistent and confused because I made different tweets saying I was libertarian, leftist, a Democrat, and a centrist because he doesn't understand that those things aren't mutually exclusive. And then he says this.
But it's moments like this that it kind of shows that Two really doesn't want to have anything to do with the alt-right in the furry fandom, even though they're big fans of his. Because it's like he says he's anti-idiot, and the only thing he listed that he isn't is alt-right. So if people in the alt-right, if you guys think this guy is your friend, with friends like this, why do you need enemies?
So now what, you're telling me who my friends are? You're telling me, aren't you getting in a little deep here? I mean, if you were getting fucked as hard as you're trying to tell me who I should be, They'd have to wrap you in duct tape so you wouldn't explode. And though I will admit fully that I don't have any proof for this at all, I'm pretty sure that's a right you reserve exclusively for Dogpatch Press. I have friends left, right, and center. I don't choose my friends based on what political side they're on, because that's fucking stupid. I could make up some stupid simile about how, well, that's as stupid as an animal with a pig and a midget, whatever, but I'm not going to, because it's just plain fucking stupid. And then finally, he drops this.
You need to look into the quotes that you were putting on Twitter to make sure that they are factually accurate before you make the rest of the furry fandom dumber. It is of the greatest ironies that you constantly put up arguments to defend individuals within hate groups when you say you are anti-hate. If you are anti-hate, you should not be defending individuals within hate groups. You should not be defending the actions of people in hate groups.
I don't mean to steamroll you here, but the plain fact is that you have about as much right to lecture me on being honest and accurate as a Filipino bar waitress has to advocate against public donkey sex. You just took some unsubstantiated, disproven, fabricated horse shit about me supporting hate groups, scraped it off the floor of Twitter, and flung it at me while simultaneously lecturing me that I need to be more accurate and honest. Normal people don't do that, okay? That's not a thing normal people do. People don't just, now listen very carefully. Always tell the truth. Also, the Chinese are aliens because internet. That's not normal, okay? Maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm completely incorrect about this, but it seems like you're wrapped up in some kind of hive mind groupthink mentality, and that's honestly, that's not a joke. And I'm talking to everybody out there, that is not a joke. That's the kind of thing that destroys lives. And you need to seek help for that. Normal people do not unquestioningly believe any psychotic shit they hear on the internet, so long as it affords them an opportunity to segregate and persecute other people. Normal people do not take information and distort it and reinterpret it until it fits what they already want to believe. Normal people do not prefer hate and outrage over peace and love. And if you find yourself in a situation where you're surrounded by people who do, then you probably need to get help. Hey, you're gonna give me some advice about me and how to be. Why don't I give you some in return? Stop unquestioningly believing every stupid piece of drivel you see on the internet. Stop deforming and distorting information so it'll fit into the narrative you want to believe. Stop thinking that you know other people better than they know themselves. Stop misreading, misinterpreting, and misrepresenting the things people say. But most importantly, stop allowing others to think for you. I know you see a lot of problems in the world and that you're afraid of them, and you know what, we all do. But attacking these problems by warping reality is not only not solving those problems, it's making you one of those problems. If you truly want to solve problems in this world, you can't segregate and persecute people just because they have different opinions than you do. You have to find common ground and work together. That's the only way problems get fixed. Oh, and last thing, stop looking at me like that. I think that's cute. Just stop it. If you or someone you care about is involved in occultist ideology, remember that you're not alone and there is help. The URL I'm putting on the screen right now is a good starting place for how to recover and how to get more help.